We are intelligent, beautiful, and strong, and we will use our intellect to behave that way. We will let our spirit guide our intellect in all of our affairs to empower ourselves, the youth, by practicing the 3 C's: concentration, consistency, and collaboration for inner peace and outer harmony. Highway to Freedom's affirmation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Miss Geraldine Smith right here, WYCA 102.3 FM, your Rejoice Gospel station. I'm here tonight with a whole bunch of people. And we always, all of us always have a different subject, but somehow we tie it all in and we come up with one big bundle of stuff. And tonight I was sitting here talking to one of our guests named Megan, and I just met Megan, and she was telling me about her, what she does, and it tied me up. I'm already tied into your bundle now, Megan, because I was trying to really get an understanding on how we overlook lifers in so many different ways. So I'm going to let Mr. Allen start this program and introduce Megan in the right way, and then we're going to come on around the table and take what we need off the table. Mr. Allen.
This is Alan Mills, the Executive Director of the Uptown People's Law Center. Thank you, as always, for having a wonderful show that we get to talk about prisons and criminal justice and all kinds of great stuff. I brought with me today Megan Selby, who has a lot of different hats, including working with Black and Pink. So, Megan, tell us about Black and Pink.
Thank you. Black and Pink is an open family of LGBTQ prisoners. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer prisoners around the U.S. We're a national organization that has over 9,000 incarcerated members around the country, and I work with our Chicago chapter. We have over 350 incarcerated members in Illinois that get a monthly newspaper from us. And we work in Chicago to match them with pen pals to build one-on-one relationships between people on the inside and folks on the outside.
Why is that necessary?
Well, as I'm sure everyone here knows, that when people are locked up, their connections to family and loved ones is really severed. And for queer and trans people in particular, they're less likely to have standing relationships with people on the outside. And so connecting them with people on the outside that they may not know but can build relationships with is one way we can offer support to people. And we encourage pen palships because it's a investment that a lot of people feel they can make, and by getting a personal relationship with someone that ties them to the institution as a whole and become invested in changing the system. But also provides material support to folks on the inside who now know someone outside. And we know that when people get mail on the inside, that guards see that, other prisoners hear that during mail call, and they know that there's someone on the outside who's looking out for this person. And so they're less likely to experience the abuses that happen in prison.
I understand why people on the inside would be thrilled to have a pen pal, but how do you find the pen pals on the outside, people who care about people in prison?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have more people on the inside who want pen pals than we have people on the outside looking for pen pals. I think that the criminal legal system is just so much more in the news now that people are hearing about it with more regularity, and a larger percent of the population, particularly white people and middle-class people, are waking up who didn't previously know about the prison crisis, are becoming aware of it in ways that they weren't before. Is being in the media more, maybe in part thanks to this show, and just all the other places we're hearing it talked about. So there's people who, when they find out about us, I think their ears perk up a little bit of like, this seems like a way I can get involved. Like, I can write letters. We're not asking people to show up at actions any big way, not a big public show. This is right. We do that too. We are engaged in local organizing as well, but this is about a very individual, personal action that we're asking people to take.
But Megan, let me ask you a question. As you know, I spent 19 years in prison. And I thank God that he didn't allow that system to break me, but to energize me more, to help people. What I do want to say right here to you is, the question is, why did it take us so long after we hear the same things over and over, and we see so much of the injustices that happen? Why is it that when you made the comment like white people don't understand in some essences or really get the feel of it until start nibbling at home? What causes that?
I think it's about relationships. And when we're not in relationships with people who are experiencing a particular injustice, that it feels really removed from us. And we might not know the depth of injustice that's going on.
You know, when you heard so many cries out about crack and so many cries out about cocaine, the cries on the crack went unheard in one sense. But in the system, it was the loudest cry. Yet you had people who were committing the same crime or being infested with the same germs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And only one side.
Right. So I think another answer to your question is white supremacy that infects people's minds. And because the criminal legal system primarily targets people of color, black people, Latino people, and poor people, that white folks don't have to engage in the system. And so if you don't have to engage in the criminal legal system, you're probably going to avoid it, because it's not a fun system to engage with.
It's not a fun system the way I see it either, but I do see from the other side. I'm a black woman, you're a white woman. Mm-hmm. But I do see white people from the other side beginning to want to hear or to listen to more about what this monster really is. This monster is not the crack or the cocaine or the alcohol. It is this system that governs these things, and they're not governing it fair. Am I right, Mr.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to your question is really simple, and I get asked it a lot. You know, why didn't I know about this before? It's the history of racism in this country. We have, as a country, not necessarily individuals, but as a country, since its founding, we have worked really hard to pretend that black people aren't real people. That's how we justified slavery for 300 years. That's how we justified Jim Crow, by pretending that the color of someone's skin somehow made them less human. And because our prison system locks up primarily people of color, then people can pretend that they're somehow animals, that they're somehow fundamentally different than you and me, people we know on the outside. And because there's so much racial segregation in this country, a lot of white people don't know very many black people. And it's easy to pretend that the ones they do know are somehow different than all those animals we lock up in prison. I mean, I spend a lot of time visiting prisoners. So this was sort of driven to go to the news this week. All over the internet was this thing where a prison debate team beat the Harvard debate team, and everybody was shocked at that. I'm not shocked at that at all.
Not at all.
There's some really bright people in prison. And, of course, there's a myth that everybody who goes to Harvard is somehow really brilliant and also off the charts. They're just really, really good at taking tests and have the right family connections to get into a place like Harvard. So, on the one hand, the people at Harvard are overrated. And people just, again, they pretend that somehow people in prison are of low intelligence. And, by the way, for any listeners who don't know, there is zero evidence that intelligence is any way correlated with going to prison. It does not exist. There's no such thing, despite what a number of people have written over the last 20, 30 years.
So we've had 3 governors to go to prison because they were illiterate?
Right. More people go to prison who are Illinois governors than are murderers in terms of percentages. The percentage of governors who've gone to prison is 50%, and we have less than a 50% solve rate of our murders. So So, it has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing whatsoever. So there's some really, really bright people in prison. Like people always say, the problem with prison is we judge people for the rest of their lives for the very worst day they've had in their entire life. And that's none of us would want to be judged by what we did on the very worst day of our lives. But somehow we pretend that people in prison, that defines
It's their
them.
life.
That's their entire life history, is the thing that they did on the very worst day that they've existed. Quite aside from all those people who are in prison who shouldn't be there at all because they're actually innocent. But even those, I mean, let's be fair, most people in prison did something to get there, but not necessarily fundamentally something different than people on the outside did.
Some people was just born black and ended up there. you know?
Absolutely. And even if they violated the law, like you were saying, crack or cocaine or whatever, more white people use crack and cocaine than black people do. Way more white people, but you wouldn't know that from looking at who's arrested for it, who's prosecuted for it, who's sent to prison for it, who's on parole for it. We only arrest certain people, black people and Latinos, for the same crimes that everybody commits. So it has nothing to do with either how many crimes you commit or what you're like. Nonetheless, they end up in prison. So why has it taken so long for white people to figure it out? Because we can pretend that the people in prison are somehow different than the rest of us, and therefore it's okay to treat them terribly.
Has that become a way of life with white people?
Yes, it has.
Sweeping it under the rug?
Yes. That's how people on the north side can pretend that Inglewood doesn't exist and can pretend that the problem in the city is the violent crime in Uptown and can pretend that we need a lot more police officers up there because we have tiny numbers of murders as compared to Inglewood that we have, and that we can pretend that gentrification is the problem everywhere. Not that it's not in Inglewood, but it's very different. Drive around Inglewood and you see lots of vacant lots, lots of houses that are falling apart, and some people who are working really hard to make it better. But it's a different world than exists in some places like Lincoln Park. Nobody, and the people who live in Lincoln Park just pretend that doesn't exist and pretend that it's black people's fault that they live that way.
No.
Well, one powerful word, and I call it ignorant. That's what I believe that has happened for years. I believe a lot of ignorance and refusal to learn better. I think it was a combination of that. Now, I'm speaking of people back in the day. Now, I also heard the comments about now that white Americans, younger particularly, and are listening more. I believe that younger people now, they are more educated now. They are more willing, they are more open-minded now.
Is that street or academically, you mean? Or as a whole?
That's as a whole. I believe now, that they're more in tune than previous generations before that, like Alan said, pretended it did not exist, pretended that is, and we're speaking of people over 40, over 50 years old now. You have younger people, you have your younger people in their 20s and 30s and teens. When you go younger like that, I believe they're a little bit more in tune, are more willing and more open-minded. And that's so I have to say, it's a generation and an age thing that goes along with it.
But I think, more of the younger white people are more willing to mingle and to learn about the other races than the older ones are. I think the older ones have a sense of fear of something.
Well, it's called setting your ways. That's just like, and that's generations regardless of what color you are. Older people after a while, once they're set, this is the way they believe. And we all know folks in our family that are like that. I have folks in my family that are like that. They're set in their ways. It is what it's going to be, and then you can't knock them away from their ways. As opposed to, I have younger relatives that are more open-minded and more accepted to, other cultures, white cultures, and whatever the case may be. So that's what I really believe. Like I say, one, ignorance, and two, it's just it's just willing to open your mind up, willing to be open-minded and not shut the door. And like I said, I believe it's a generational thing. I believe it's an age gap thing.
Well, I hope you're right, but I got to say, there was a period of time in the 50s, early 60s, where there were a lot of white people who were very interested in civil rights. joined with black people all over the country to try to change the world. And they did to some extent, but there's been a huge swing back again. And, 70s, 80s, and that's why at the same time we started the war on drugs and the war on crime, and this huge incarceration thing happened after the civil rights movement, not before it.
Right.
So, I think that some of those people who were very active before became less active and like you say, changed. So I'm hoping that the younger generation stays that way, but I think every younger generation starts that way.
Yeah, and to go back to what you said, you're absolutely right. When it comes down to the civil rights, I believe what happened, the reason why that drop off became in that time period of the 70s and the 80s and things of that nature is because of like everything else. I mean, once that group of people that fought, and Red I talk about this all the time, people that demanded, those people that stood up for something. You lost those people. You lost those leaders. You lost those folks along the way. When those folks got older and went off the scene, you had no one else really to take the ball and keep it rolling. That's part of your issue. Once those pioneers went on, through death and things of that nature, you didn't have anybody that they passed the baton off to. So the baton got dropped. So that's the reason why you had this divide come back, because no one took the baton and kept it going. And
on the baton it has a fire.
Yeah.
And if the fire go out, ain't no need to pass it.
But only some of that. Some of that's absolutely true. But there was we shouldn't underestimate the huge pushback, and particularly through the criminal justice system. It was immediately after the Civil Rights Act got passed in 1965 that we started arming local police officers, that we invented this whole SWAT team idea, and that the war on drugs started. It was immediately afterwards. So, yeah, I'm sure there were some individual leadership problems, and I'm sure there was some organizing in terms of passing it on to the next generation. But it's a structural issue, like Geraldine started off today. It's the system really that pushed back. And Goldwater started this with his campaign, but Nixon really perfected it with his whole Southern strategy. And
then Bill Clinton didn't help it, but the 3 strikes you out.
Absolutely, it's been a bipartisan effort.
But don't forget about the Black Panthers when they say arm yourself. All that came after they got rid of that military force of them Panthers. That was Reagan and all that gun stuff. They changed all that around.
Yep.
Ain't no right to bear arms no more.
Right.
It's just like this city is broke, but they found $100 million to take 300 police off the desk. I talked to some of the police on the desk, and they listening to your show. They told me, they say, Red, don't you know we've been behind the desk for 20 years? We don't have any intel in the street. You think we finna go out there and get in the way and get killed? We finna get us some coffee, some donuts, and sit on the side of the lot. You'll see a lot of us.
The killing.
Okay, I didn't want to really tell them, but they told me, they said, what would I go out there for after being behind the desk 20 years? They said they could have kept that overtime and put it into the community and help the children have something to do, such as your organization, Life Builders, Robert House, a whole bunch of places. It's a bunch of places, a bunch of people that need money that that's structured in the community where you at that would help if they had something to help with.
Exactly.
Accountability and responsibility.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hey. I'm glad I'm the only one not saying it. I'm happy about it, to be quite honest. But this system thing, I hear this system all the time. Absolutely. Systematic. Everything is systematic. But you know what? I also say this, and I continue to say this. I warranty and I guarantee, if you get enough of us to stand up, enough of us, I don't care what you say about a system.
You won't.
If you get enough folks to stand up like they're supposed to, can't no system beat a whole lot of folk.
Right.
You can systemize and put in all you want, but if you get enough people from the north, south, east, west, whatever, to come together and unify, you can knock down that system. That system is just a willingness to knock down the system. And I believe, and that's where your divide comes in, because you have some, I want to knock it down, but then you have others, it's all right by me until it hits home, and then you're ready to knock down the system. It's time to start being proactive, and I've said that, and I'll continue to say it. It's time to start being proactive instead of reactive. This is why your systems always win. It's because of the fact of reacting instead of being proactive.
I think that's what we're seeing now too, and why more people are getting involved, because Black leadership in this country is growing and multiplying, and it's doing so in a way that addresses intersectionality in ways that we haven't seen in my lifetime anyway, where we're not just talking about one particular identity, that Black organizers are talking about gender and sexuality and really opening up a conversation where many people can come in and be their whole selves in a space and fight for our collective liberation together. And that's something I'm seeing a lot from organizers in Chicago with Black Youth Project 100 and We Charge Genocide, is they're talking about the criminal legal system, but addressing the impacts on a really broad range of people. And additionally, that the system is affecting more communities now. Certainly it still targets
But the system
poor
has-
Black and Latino communities, but white people are getting drug in more too. Like, that's what's happening in my family. When I first started engaging in this work, I had no personal connection to people on the inside. I did so through volunteering at a Books to Prisoners project is how I first got connected to people on the inside. But since then, my hometown of Lafayette, the drug wars come to town, and so many people there are being swooped up into the system. My sister and all of her friends, like so many people she knows,
Through
white
all your
people in
reading, have you ever
Lafayette.
studied COINTELPRO?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why we lost leadership, right? In large part, it's not like leadership just went away and was like, peace, we're done, right? They got locked up and killed.
But you know what else I see? And I'm putting this out on the table, and y'all can dissect it however you want. I'm noticing that the religious factions, the different religious factions, okay, where you talk about the gays and the lesbian or whatever, the red flags goes up. And then when you talk about Blackness over here with certain areas, the rich areas, the the Oak Brooks, and the red flags goes up. And then when you talk about drugs, comparing the two different, when it comes to the system, the legal system, the red flags goes up, because nobody want to admit that crack and cocaine was the same drug, but then because one was a poor drug, one is a rich drug, you got these different results from that. But at the same time, I'm sitting back sometime and I just watch out in Oak Brook this week, last Sunday. I was invited to hear a young speaker, very nice friend, couple of mine, husband and wife. And I goes out there, and I'm the only black face sitting in this audience. I felt good. Because I challenge it. I don't care about those things. And I watched this young man talk about helping us to get better. And he said one thing that was so profound. Get rid of your junk mail. And he's talking about listening in our ears. When people tell us, sit on our shoulders and tell us what we can't do or what we shouldn't be doing, he would like, delete the junk mail. Because there'll always be that junk mail that try to infiltrate the good things that you're thinking about doing and how you're doing. I might want to walk up and hug a white man, but the junk mail will tell me, that's a white man. You're hugging him.
Well, also experience tells you that. Probably that's not going to... Reality says it's not probably a good idea.
But why not?
Because a white man can't walk up and hug you because you'll be called a nigger lover.
But why not? Hug me anyway.
We know better.
Why do the junk mail?
That's
But
right.
what I'm saying, why
Right.
do the junk mail always override everything else that we, go ahead. No.
I was getting ready to say, how I don't like to say old. What was the age of this individual?
I think he was 29. 29.
It goes back to what I stated. Go back to what I stated.
Yeah.
He's not 50. He's not 60. He's 29 years old.
But his audience was a middle class audience.
Good. But
And they loved him.
and that's why I think that's why I had Megan come today, because I think that's why the correspondence stuff that they do is so important, because it does expose people on the outside to people on the inside and breaks down those barriers. That one-on-one connection can't be beat. and it just can't be. So pen pals, I think, it's a good thing for the people on the inside, but actually I think it's even more helpful for the people on the outside.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and a good example that we need to watch is how the gays push forward rather than allowing what people was thinking to push them backwards. They kept marching forward till they got their rights there.
And I was getting ready to say, I mean, that's a lesson. That's a lesson to be learned. I mean, if everybody, that's why I said what I said about systems and all of this. And I don't mean now. Yeah, I do mean it. I do mean to to go back to this again. I mean to go back to our good mayor one more time. I really do. Because right now we could have a different mayor if we wanted to. Whatever you wanted to say about the system, they had it this, they had it that, that's one of the biggest lies ever told. You know why we don't have a different mayor? Because the people did not come out and did not unify and vote enough to have a different mayor in office.
And oh, do they wish they had her.
But the thing of the matter is, these are the same individuals that said how no good he was and he didn't do anything, but you didn't do anything to fire him. I blame the people. There's no system. Again, can't no system beat out. How many people is it in Chicago? About 3
million.
Now, if you had half of that, 1.5 million, to come out, you nobody can sit and look me dead in my face and tell me that a system could beat 1.5 million people to vote and fire a guy.
Yeah, well,
can't tell me that.
And that's part of our work as a LGBTQ organization to say that gay marriage is not the only LGBTQ issue, that prisons are an LGBTQ issue, that solitary confinement is an LGBTQ issue. Black and Pink is about to release the largest survey of LGBTQ prisoners ever done. We had about 2,000 incarcerated people respond. And the vast majority of them have done time in solitary. 60% have done more than a year in solitary confinement. And added all together, those 2,000 respondents have spent over 5,000 years in solitary confinement. And so we have to make sure the mayor knows that solitary and all prison issues, if he says he's an ally to queer people, that he needs to get on board with prison reform, changing this system.
I completely agree. I think that I agree with both of you, actually. I think that power is always with the people, but they have to use that power. And who was it, Frederick Douglass, who said that power never concedes anything without a demand.
And I'm a funnel of power. You know, I
Yes,
allow
you
God
are.
to funnel that power through me to
That's
pass
why we're
on
here.
to others. Ladies and gentlemen, this is WICA 102.3 FM, your Rejoice Gospel station. I'm Miss Geraldine Smith, and this is A Pleasant Encounter. It's a pleasant encounter because we offer you different subjects, different know-hows, different unknowns, and special events that comes up in our minds that we need to answer these questions to. Remember that all the things that we do here at Crawford Broadcasting is permitted by Crawford Broadcasting, but not necessarily his views and ideas on how they should go and which way they should go. But he do allow this platform for the people to be heard, and I serve as a voice to the people, especially with my co-hosts here, Mr. Norm and Mr. Red and Mr. Allen, and we will not forget our dear friend, Mr. Brian, who should be back with us real soon. Ladies and gentlemen, WICA 102.3 FM, your Rejoice Gospel Network. I'm Miss Geraldine Smith, and I bid you.
You have been listening to A Pleasant Encounter with Miss Geraldine Smith. We hope that you've enjoyed your journey with Miss Smith and pray that you've been inspired.